Joining us now, as he does each and every Monday, the co-host of the Bob McCown podcast, as well as the former executive director of Hockey Night in Canada. It's our Monday regular NHL insider, Mr. John Shannon. How you doing, John, after a weekend of Game 7s?
Wow, wasn't that something? Wasn't that something? And not to bang the hockey drum too much, but the 5 Game 7s versus what we saw with the 2 NBA games on the weekend. Oh my goodness gracious!
We just talked about that.
Oh, did you really? I mean, hockey is not in the mainstream in the United States. It's not. That's just a reality. When the networks in the U.S. are bragging about numbers that regionally can exist in a Canadian market, in Toronto or Montreal, regionally, and they're talking about a country of 330 million people. Our game is so exciting right now. Our game is on the edge every night. And it's the classic case. If you go to a game, you're hooked. We just have to find a way to get like 90,000 seat stadiums for people to get hooked. Because it hooked me. It hooked me this weekend again. It did. It's amazing.
Well, especially yesterday, the 2 games going overtime, right? I mean, like just sensational stuff that we get even bonus hockey from a Game 7 and all that tension that it creates.
And then when you consider on Saturday night, it was the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then in the second game, it was Connor McDavid. Yeah. I mean, the amount of drama that existed on both Saturday and Sunday night was phenomenal.
The one thing I'll say about that narrative too is I'm glad that Connor McDavid had a playoff moment or two in that series. Like he was just so incredible in the last couple of games where nobody can say, oh, he's soft, oh, he can't perform in the playoffs. Like the guy was an absolute menace over the last couple of games.
Best I've ever seen him play, Blake. To me, the measuring stick for a 200-foot player has been Sidney Crosby. Offensively skilled, make the people around him better, not afraid to go into his own zone, not afraid to use his body, and he's 5'10". Well, Connor McDavid was the best Sidney Crosby I've seen in a long time on these last 2 games for sure, and that was always the complaint. Well, you know what? He's not Crosby. He doesn't play 200 feet. Well, you know what? He bloody well played 200 feet for the last couple of games. He was remarkable.
Who do you like, before we leave the topic, who do you like in the Battle of Alberta?
I want it to go 9. The Western League used to have those best of 9s. Can we have a Western League best of 9 for the Calgary Edmonton series? Gosh, you know what? To me, it's going. The 2 variables are McDavid and Markstrom versus Smith. And if Mike Smith can go toe-to-toe with Jacob Markstrom, then I like the Oilers. That, to me, is the biggest key. The depth of the 2 teams is comparable. The defense, both of them have weakness. You wonder if Chris Tanev is going to be healthy enough to play. But that's a huge factor. So to me, the 2 variables are, those 2 goaltenders. And there is some irony to it, I think, when you think that Smith, or maybe it's coincidence, I always get those 2 confused. When Smith's the former Flame, and Markstrom was this close to signing with Edmonton. This close. I mean, we're talking about, they really believe in Edmonton that they had him signed to a deal. Only to get the phone call an hour later saying, no, we've decided we got an extra year from Calgary. We're going to go to Calgary. That, to me, those 2 storylines, and Mike Smith's one of those guys right now, and to me, he's not to drone on about this, but remember Roberto during the Olympics in 2010, and every time the Americans put the puck across the blue line, you had, oh my goodness, Roberto, stop the puck. Well, that's Mike, and all Mike has done is stop the puck. Undefeated in the last month of the regular season, and made 1 gaffe in Game 1 and played well enough to win the rest of the way. So He's not orthodox, that's for sure. But so Markstrom versus Smith, and then how the Flames can manage McDavid. Those to me are the two keys to a series that should go 7.
I remember talking, I think you were there too, Blake, to Ferraro between the third intermission or between the third period and the overtime of the gold medal game. And asked him, how do you feel about Canada and Luongo? He goes, I'd feel better if he didn't have an ejector button in that glove hand. Everything was tenuous and nervous with Roberto, but he got the job done. Let's move on to the Vancouver Canucks. Since we last talked to you, Bruce Boudreau has committed to the Canucks. I'm sure from ownership and management's point of view, it may have taken a while. I'm sure from Bruce's point of view, he had a couple more weeks contractually to pursue other avenues if he so chose. What did you make of the timing of Bruce finally committing there on Friday in a 5 p.m. newser?
Well, I think he got the cryptic message there was going to be nothing else out there for him. I mean, I can't confirm that, but to me, that's pretty obvious, is that in the end, the best offer going was to coach the Vancouver Canucks, and I think it's a win-win. Bruce has always believed in his ability to coach, and so he will take that to the bank. I think it's a huge public relations positive for the Canucks that the lovable Bruce Boudreau is coming back. So in many ways, even though there was a moment of doubt in the relationship, it's a win for both sides. It's a win for both sides. And
yet he also knows he's going to have to make adjustments, which is, not impossible. We won't be ageist here, but they are clearly asking for him to change the way he coaches this group of players. Rutherford saying today in an interview, it's confirmation of what we already know. You can't win playing wide open hockey. Now, I wouldn't say what the Canucks did under Boudreau was wide open hockey, certainly more wide open than it was under Green, however. And you do wonder, where's that sweet spot? What do they expect Boudreau to do with this group? Because playing structured hockey, or the attempted structure of Travis Green, that didn't work either. So, It's going to be interesting to see how each side keeps up their end of the bargain to play structured hockey, but also with better players that are more capable of it, I suppose.
Well, and you have a veteran coach, and you have a veteran president, and you've got a rookie general manager. And part of this, too, is trying to figure out the influences that Patrick Allvin will have on all of this. There are stories, and I believe them, that there's indication that Allvin wants to be much more driven by analytics and driven by the science of hockey, as opposed to what I would describe as the emotional or motivational side of the game that Bruce is very good at. And that's where I think Bruce has to be more receptive. Guys, I don't think, it's when you said that ageist, it's not ageist. It's Daryl Sutters believes in the numbers. Daryl Sutter can play that way. Barry Trotz can play that way. What you have to learn, you have to learn to evolve. And I think that if Bruce wants to stay in the game, as long as he says he does, and he wants to win, then there has to be some level of evolution for Bruce too, because you can't just live on fans chanting your name and the rah stuff. There has to be more to it. There has to be more science to it, but at the same time, you have to be able to know how to practically apply the analytics stuff. You can't live with it 100% of the time, and that's what coaches have to determine.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you just said. But there's also that pressure on Rutherford now. Like, he can't just return much of the same group and say, okay, now do it with structure. Like, this seems not good enough, too. So Rutherford, and he knows this, too, he wants to make changes. But what he does, what he gives to Boudreau is just as important.
Correct. And what we're seeing, I think, is, what we saw on Friday, is that Jimmy is confident in his ways and will do anything to win, whether that's changing the staff somehow, some way. I suspect we're going to hear about the assistant coaches to a great extent as well in that, what happens with the assistant coaches. In my mind, at this point on the 16th of May, I suspect, some of them may come back. I suspect the safest one, if he wants to be back, is Scott Walker. But everybody else might be on a short leash or no leash at all.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, this is, and we talked about this a ton early on after Jim took over. These are the growing pains that's going to occur when you change management and a management style, and when you give Jim Rutherford a license to do it. Because Jim is building something that no one has ever done before. He's trying to make this a model organization, and without trying to compromise his own beliefs, and then trying to make sure that the influences that have regularly appeared in Vancouver, whether that be ownership or fans, mean nothing. And that what we're seeing right now is that first influence that Jim Rutherford is saying, I am doing what I want to do. I will do it when I want to do it. And if you don't like it, don't come along.
And those changes extend to the support staff, scouting and support staffs. Now, with scouting staffs, it stands to reason. As you know, when you go at the strength and conditioning coach, the athletic therapist, and those sorts of confidants of the players, that's got to be done with a fair bit of due deliberation. What's your take on Rutherford and Allvin changing up the five different members of the support staff last week?
Well, I actually think that this is where Bruce probably weighed in too. So I don't think it's just Patrick and Jim. I suspect that it was Bruce weighing in as well, saying, okay, I'm back, but I need some, because in the end, remember, they're part of the event level group, where the coach lives. And so I think that Bruce probably had some influence in a little bit of this as well, saying, if we're going to do it, we have to do it so that everybody's comfortable. And you're right about being the player's confidants. So then you wonder, it becomes a level of trust. Can there be trust and belief? And when you get a new regime, you guys have been around this business long enough to know, when you get a new regime, they want to put their own people in everywhere.
Do you get the feeling that that's a local hire, or do you think that either
I have no idea.
Pittsburgh guy or ex-Boudreau guys come?
Well, the answer is, when you've been around the game as long as both Jim and Bruce have been, and now Patrick, your Rolodex. Now half your crowd has to go and Google what Rolodex means. When you have your list. This is all about networking. This is all about friends. This is all about associates. This is all about who can help whom. I'm sure that as the year wore on, both Rutherford and Boudreau and then on top of that, Allvin had an idea of who they could put in place to be part of their system going in a single direction. The other thing is you do mention that. The five guys are confidants of the players, but exit interviews reveal lots of stuff, and I would find it hard to believe that if every player was asked, what do you think of John Sanderson, what do you think of so and so, and it was 100% player endorsement, that something would have moved on. I suspect that the players' influences on this, they do have a bit of a say in this kind of stuff as well.
They want to move out cap space. He said it again today. How difficult
you know what that
be
means
this summer. You
know what that means. We're going to say, here comes the JT Miller stories again. Really?
Yeah.
It's just, that's the obvious one. It's unfortunate. I wish it wasn't that case. I love watching the guy play.
Unless he's got a miracle defenseman trade. I mean, they're both long shots in Myers and OEL. That would be the only other. And I suppose there's Besser possibilities too, but he's not instant cap space because he doesn't make a ton of money right now. But the miracle defenseman trade is theoretically there too.
Yeah, or both.
Yeah,
or both.
Yeah.
Hey, you want Miller? You got to take somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, in order when you took Ekman Larson, you had to take Garland too.
It's true. Or vice versa.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, or vice versa. So from that case, I just think that, and the rumblings I've heard is that Miller's at the top of the list.
And then re-signing any of the guys that are left behind, the Bessers and that sort of thing. And is that another bridge deal? Is that a 3-year deal for Brock Besser? Can he convince the camp that they need another 2-year deal, or even for Brock Besser as a show me sort of time period?
This is where Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin's ability to play poker. They will be able to say, no, we just don't give out long-term deals. It's either a bridge deal or it's nothing, and then we'll move you. Jimmy didn't sign Sid. There weren't very many long-term deals in Pittsburgh. There weren't. It was, that 3 to 4 year scenario. Same thing in Carolina. Unless you were a bona fide superstar, you weren't signing for the maximum.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, John, Peter DeBoer out in Vegas. What are you hearing there in terms of replacements? And would Boudreau have been a candidate had he not recommitted to the Canucks late last week?
I know he and George are friends, George McPhee. And we had George on our show last week, and there was no endorsement of DeBoer. He and George actually recounted what the process was going to be, that it was going to be Kelly and George meeting, and then later in the week, like Friday and Saturday, it would be Kelly, George, and Bill Foley meeting. So I'm not surprised about the DeBoer scenario today. The obvious one is Barry Trotz, but I think there are 10 owners in the NHL, 6 of them who still have coaches that look and say, maybe we can get Barry Trotz, and we have to look at that. Between Vegas, there's a Manitoba connection. There's always a Manitoba connection in Vegas between Brandon, Manitoba's Kelly McCrimmon, and Dauphin, Manitoba's Barry Trotz. But I've also heard Winnipeg for Trotz as well, and going home and being the head coach of the Winnipeg Jets and giving that team some structure that they dearly need. So I don't think there's anybody jumping out right now. I don't think that deal's been made yet. And who knows? Who knows who else is going to be let go in the next little while? There's a chance we may not be done with the dismissal of coaches in the NHL yet.
Is that Sheldon Keefe, John? Do you think Sheldon Keefe's in trouble?
No, I don't. I don't. I'm not sure that what the Leafs need changed is in the front office. I think what needs to be changed is a few of the moving parts on the ice. But I just don't get a sense that, whether it's Shanahan and Dubas and Keefe, I don't get a sense that they're in danger at this point.
Tough to predict. In a market here, John, that has heard a lot of moral victory speeches, I didn't think that comment by Keefe about the handshake line. He doubled back on it and said, hey, but we're in the winning business. I didn't love that. Respecting the handshake line, that fell very hard on the ears of Leaf fans, I think. It's not about that at all.
Oh, I agree, but the biggest difference, the biggest difference between the Maple Leafs and most other teams is that when you talk about ownership in Vancouver, you can talk about Francesco. You can talk about Dallas. You can talk about Tom Gillardy.
Right.
Rangers. You talk about Jim Dolan. Carolina. You talk about Tom Dundon. Who do you talk about with the Maple Leafs? And it's this innocuous 2 giant corporations that get along in that boardroom just so that the other guy can't have all the content. That's why they do
weird.
It.
Yeah.
And Larry Tannenbaum in the role as the Secretary General of the United Nations. So it's a different animal. I've had lots of friends that have worked for the Maple Leafs and then go work for an entrepreneur, and they can't manage working for the entrepreneur because the entrepreneur wants the decision right now. MLSE will have a committee, and we'll talk about it in a month. And like, you get back to us in a month, because that's how the corporations work. So this is the MLSE, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, is a totally different animal, I think, than any other team in the National Hockey League.
Damn it, John, this is Sekeres and Price. We make decisions now. We make decisions. There's no evil overlord here. We make decisions.
I was joking with a friend of mine. They said, what kind of producer were you? I said, well, I'll tell you what. I liked my ability to make decisions on the air, off the air. And if I had a batting average as good as my decision-making, I would have been in Cooperstown at 30. Because I was batting about 650. And to bat 650, I would have been in the National Baseball Hall of Fame.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Remember, Blake, we have that meeting to strike the committee to study.
Yes.
To eventually get back to us on the decision we have to make for next month.
We have a committee for the committee on the leadership committee.
Marvelous stuff, John. Enjoy the second round here. We'll be watching with you and catch up next Monday.
Battle of Alberta, boys. Can't get any better.
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be fun. John Shannon, everybody, our Monday NHL insider from the Bob McCown podcast, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada. Some interesting stuff that he said there reminded me Markstrom was so close to signing with Edmonton. I think he's spot on that there wasn't a job available for Bruce Boudreau, and that was one of the things that led him back to Vancouver. I think he's also quite right in this ongoing tension between Allvin, who I do think wants to do things a little more analytically, and Bruce, which is more of a people manager and a personality manager. And then we'll see about Rutherford and long-term deals and whether or not they are just verboten in his world with the Vancouver Canucks, because that could have some big implications this summer on three fronts: Miller, Horvat, and Besser. Right?
Well, the list of core players, quote unquote core players in Vancouver, is bigger than what actually is. Like, you look around the contenders in the National Hockey League, like, who are the core players on any given team? You don't have four guys making $9 million. Right. Ultimately, who are the core players? And, does that mean that Brock Besser and those kinds of guys are not actually, even though they're here, and I'm not saying Brock Besser won't be a Vancouver Canuck, but does he get treated differently than Pettersson and Hughes? And
I think
yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think the answer in the short term here with, and I know you said he isn't making the big money yet, but 5.875 for Besser and looking at a 7.5 QO that's pretty significant cheddar. You'd have to be quite sold on Brock Besser, I think, to offer that kind of money going forward on a longer term deal.